Hi, it's Steph, and we're at the Home Depot. They have some new late season perennials. They've started some markdowns on inventory, and even the fall annuals are starting to show up. So let's go ahead and take a look at the August inventory at the Home Depot. If you don't have sedum in your garden, it is one of the best perennials for late season color. The pollinators love it, and they have these really large leaves and thick stems that hold on to a lot of water, which means they're also drought tolerant. They like a very well-draining soil and full sun, but I just love to see these loaded with bees so late in the season. In the spring, they start to emerge and you get this little clump of foliage, then they shoot up their stems, and then you get these clusters that will then bloom. So you get a really long season of interest. And this variety specifically has these red stems and large leaves, which is really pretty. It's the Matrona sedum stonecrop. So here it is. Matrona, and it has a clumping habit, drought tolerant, deer resistant. It does want full sun. These are $10.98 in the Vigoro containers, and this variety gets to be about 24 inches in height and needs 18-inch spacing, and very hardy. All sedums are pretty hardy, down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. But look at those really pretty red stems. And another absolute must-have in the late summer garden for me is clumping perennial alliums. Now, these are different than the allium bulbs that you plant in fall and bloom in spring. These bloom later in the summer. So for me in my 6B, 7A garden, that is usually in August, which is amazing because at that point, most plants start to get tired and then these beauties show up. Now, they're an ornamental onion, which means the deer and rabbit stay away from them because they don't like the fragrance. Now, if you're standing next to them, they don't necessarily smell like onions, but if you touch the foliage or you divide it or cut it, then you will smell it. But I don't mind. And you know who else loves this plant? The pollinators. There are bees and butterflies all over it all of the time. Very cold tolerant, drought resistant, loves full sun, really great perennial, and super easy to divide. So this is the Serendipity variety by Proven Winners. I would say that these are hardy from probably a zone 3 or 4 up to about an 8 or 9. So really great range of hardiness on these. And then they also have this variety by Vigoro right on the side of the Proven Winner Serendipity. And this one is called Summer Beauty. I have it in my garden. It has a lighter shade than the Serendipity, which is purple. This one is more of a lighter pink and really beautiful. It gets to be 22 to 24 inches in height and 12 to 15 inches in width. Hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The Serendipity was in a 3-gallon container for $24.98, but it is a pretty large clump, which means you could take this home and divide it into at least 3 plants. Just keep your transplants well watered until they start establishing some roots. And if you garden in more shade, a heuchera is a great option. This is a foliage plant that adds a lot of visual interest, color, and texture to a shady spot in the garden. And I recently had someone tell me that this is a really great variety. It is the Black Olive, Carnival Black Olive, $10.98 for these containers by Vigoro, and it wants part sun to shade. Now, when you put these in sun, morning sun will be best because it is softer. So up to 4 hours of morning sun, they'll do fine. And they do send up bloom stalks. At some point in the season, you'll get these little sprays that look like baby's breath. The pollinators love them. If you don't like them, you can cut them off. But I think that they're really pretty. And again, the foliage is the real reason to grow these. So this Black Olive variety is really pretty. They're also generally pretty hardy. So let's check it out. This one is hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it gets to be 10 to 12 inches in height and needs 14 to 16 inches in width. And if you like catmint and nepeta earlier in the season, then you would love calamenta. This is a later blooming variety of catmint or nepeta. And a lot of times they come in this beautiful shade of white. In fact, I have one in my garden right now looking lovely. The pollinators absolutely love it. It smells minty like nepeta. And this one is called the Calamint Trumphador. I actually have the Montrose white, but it's also this very light white shade, gorgeous. And it's gotten pretty large. I want to say it's about 3 feet in width and about 2 feet in height. This variety says that it gets 12 to 18 inches in height, 12 to 18 inch spacing, negative 20 degrees hardiness. And these are $9.98 in the Home Depot brand container. My store is actually starting some markdowns, and here you can see they have a special buy on their #1 house brand containers, 2 for $15 on these perennials. So here they have some hosta, which is a great plant for a shady garden. They come in so many different colors and patterns that they're a great way to add color to a shady spot. The one caveat is that they are like deer salad, so if you deal with deer in your garden and you don't have a fence, be prepared to spray or they can get eaten down. Super hardy plants, really easy to divide in spring when they emerge from the soil, so you can very quickly grow your collection. This one is called Diana Remembered. Oh, that's beautiful. And it is perennial. They want part sun. These are mostly shade plants, so if you are going to give them sun, morning sun up to 4 hours would be fine. And they do send up bloom stalks. In fact, this variety right on the side has some of its bloom stalks up, and the pollinators love them. They have these little bell-shaped blooms in shades of white and purple. Very pretty. But if you don't like them, you can also follow that stem down to the base of the plant where the foliage starts and cut it off. I would recommend leaving them up for a little bit because they really are a great source of food for our pollinator friends. But really pretty foliage. These look very healthy, 2 for $15. So check out your store and see if they might be on sale there. And Russian sage, another beautiful and colorful late season perennial. And if you love vertical interest plants like salvias and nepitas, then the Russian sage is another great option for your mid to late season color. It has a wonderful fragrance. It likes a well-draining soil that leans dry and a full sun location, another plant that the pollinators love. So Russian sage, this one here is in a Vigoro container, and the variety is called Crazy Blue, and it says deer resistant, attractive foliage, and has a shrubby habit. And this variety stays pretty compact at 16 to 18 inches in height and needs 14 to 16 inch spacing, hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. I will tell you that most varieties sit somewhere in that 3 to 4 feet tall range. So if you don't give them enough sun, or if they get too much water, they can sometimes spread in the center and not look as attractive. So the hotter location, the more sun, the better for Russian sage. You know what else blooms for a really long time and goes until your first hard frost? Butterfly bush. This is a shrubby plant that emerges late in the spring but will bloom until your first hard frost. It is Buddleia, also known as butterfly bush, and they have quite a few here in the Home Depot brand containers. This one looks like it could be more compact, but always read the tags because these can be quite deceiving. They look small here and then you'll plant them out and they'll be huge. So for example, this one here does appear to be pretty compact. It's called Chrysalis, and it has a height listed of 20 to 28 inches, 24 to 30 inch, or sorry, 26 to 30 inch spacing. Water when dry, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms early spring through fall. Now these definitely want a well-draining soil. If you put it in a bed or in an area that stays too wet with the wet winter temperatures, you can lose your plant and they won't return next spring. And to keep them tidy, you can just pinch off these spent blooms and they will keep pushing out new blooms until you get your first hard frost. So a really good bloomer, and in my opinion, they're pretty fragrant. I feel like they smell like lilacs. Let me know what you think. And then there's this variety that the blooms look a lot longer, and this one is called Chrysalis Cranberry. It looks like a similar size, 28 inches in height, 26 to 30 inches in width. Water when dry, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. But a really pretty kind of rose pink on this one. They also still have lots of lavender here at my store, and this is English lavender, which I grew the Munstead variety for quite a few years until finally it just started to decline. Lavender can sometimes get woody and then it won't bloom as well, so I did have to start over with lavender. But the English variety I found could handle a little bit more moisture than some of the other varieties like the Spanish or French varieties, because those are Mediterranean climates, so it tends to be a little drier, so they want a well-draining soil that leans dry and full sun. But the English lavender tended to do a little bit better for me with a little bit more moisture. I wouldn't say that it wants to sit in soggy soil, but if you have a little bit of moisture that drains well, it can handle it. And it has this beautiful blue-gray foliage. And this variety says that it does want full sun, like all lavenders. Pretty compact, 12 to 24 inches in height, needs 18-inch spacing, and hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms early to late summer. It does tell you requires excellent drainage and to keep your new transplants watered until they establish some roots. And we're heading into the fall, friends, which is the perfect time to do some planting. The soil is still warm enough for your plants to establish some roots. We naturally get more moisture. It's more comfortable to work outside, and there's less pests and disease pressure. So all in all, a great time of year to plant. They still have lots of coleus here at my store, and these make a great fall planted annual. So if you have them now from the summer, you can keep them going through the fall. They have such beautiful foliage colors that I think really lend themselves well to the fall season. And pentas. I'm growing pentas for the first time this year, and I'm really enjoying them. I have a variety that's actually more on the red side, like this. And it has been really pretty, has bloomed nonstop, loves the heat, and is pretty drought tolerant. They also have this really pretty pink variety. These are in the Vigoro containers, and they are $9.98, and they want full sun. And mums. They have the 6-pack of mums for $10.98. But here is my yearly PSA on buying mums too early. Mums love water. So unless you're prepared to be watering every single day, maybe twice a day, because they dry out so fast, I would hold off on buying your mums to mid-September. That would be my preference. You can do what you'd like, of course. But if you are going to buy mums, you certainly want to buy them very tightly budded like this so that you can get longer out of them. They also do really well being bottom watered, so you would take your container, sit them in a bucket or a low pail of water to let them sop up that water from the bottom, and make sure that that soil stays moist because they really do like water. But those are my tips on mums. Personally, I usually wait until after the kids have gone back to school and I start decorating for fall, closer to the first day of fall, really. But these are already showing up here at the local box store garden center. And here they have some 8-inch containers of mums that are already in bloom for $6.98. I do see the appeal of buying them with a couple of blooms, because then you know that the color you're buying is the color that you're hoping for, but you just don't get quite as much time out of them. So I would choose one that maybe looks like that, so you can see as it cracks bud what color it would be, but that there aren't too many open blooms on it just yet. Some pretty varieties. You can see here they have these in the red. They also have some of the white ones. And then as the season goes on, you're going to find a lot more colors like golden yellows and even this really pretty kind of rose pink that they have there. Now, in some areas, these can be perennial. They can come back for you. In most places, they're not as hardy as some of the true perennial mums, like the Sheffield, which I have in my garden and is gorgeous. But you can always try planting them. You might get them to return for a year or two. These Suncredible sunflowers, or the Sunfinity, these are excellent. They bloom for such a long time. They are branching, which means you always have a ton of blooms on the plant, and they do well in containers as well as in the landscape. Though I will tell you, if you have it in a container, you have to put it in kind of a bigger container that will hold on to more moisture, because they're pretty thirsty plants. They like a good amount of water and full sun. These are annual, but such good flower power for a seasonal plant. And these here are the Sunfinity, and they're $15.98 for, it looks like about a 1.5 gallon container. Here's another gorgeous heuchera. I actually have this one in my garden. It's done okay for me. It's the watermelon variety, Carnival Watermelon. And it has these beautiful shades of almost like an orangey with red on the undersides of the leaves. And then these that look almost like a caramel color. All in all, just a really pretty foliage plant. The Carnival Watermelon Coral Bells. Attractive foliage attracts butterflies, has a mounded habit, part sun, so maybe 4 hours of morning sun or afternoon shade, or full shade would be great too. They get to be 10 to 12 inches in height, 14 to 16 inches in width, and hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And these are $10.98. So a very compact heuchera or coral bell. This annual here is an absolute beauty. I've gotten my mom turned on to it, and now she wants to buy one every year as well and asks me if I've seen them yet. This is the Dragon's Breath Celosia. So it has this darkish colored foliage, but it gets these really beautiful plumes in almost like a reddish pink color. It's a really beautiful and eye-catching annual plant. It won't return next year. Once you get your first frost, it'll be done, but it's really pretty. So I would prefer this to mums if I were going to buy an annual plant. So here it is, the Celosia Dragon's Breath. It's an upright annual, drought tolerant, easy to grow. These are $22.98. They come in these decorative containers. Sometimes you can find them in that $9.98 Vigoro smaller planter, and then you can just put them in your own containers. But this is a real pretty one. They also have some of these ornamental kales and cabbages, and they're number 6 containers for $3.98. It's another one I would hold off on until the temperatures get a bit cooler, but not a bad price on these, and they look really pretty planted in a fall arrangement. Another really beautiful Celosia for fall planters. This one has this really pretty fuzzy hot pink or kind of like a fuchsia bloom. I have also grown this variety before. I think it was called like Asian Garden. Really pretty, easy to grow from seed as well. But these here are in a Vigoro gallon container for $9.98. Another absolute favorite of mine for a late season perennial that adds a lot of movement and texture are ornamental grasses. They get blooms, which are these fuzzy plumes that look like wheat or straw later in the season, so usually mid to late summer, and they persist through fall. Some of them change colors. Just the movement and texture that they add is worth growing them for. They add a lot of dimension, and this variety is excellent. And the first time I see it here at the Home Depot. Normally, when you see the dwarf fountain grasses, you see the Hamlin, which can get anywhere from 20 to 24 inches tall and wide, which is still nice and compact and great for the front of a border. But this one is Piglet, which is a little bit smaller. How cute is that? So this one here, the dwarf fountain grass Piglet, it's a perennial grass with attractive foliage, great for mixed gardens, and it has a mounded growth habit. You can see all of the blooms or plumes that it will push out as the season goes on. $12.98 for these. Now all ornamental grasses are going to want full sun, except for the ones that like shade, like the Japanese forest grass. So plant these in full sun. They send up those plumes in mid to late summer. This variety gets to be 18 inches in height and needs 24-inch spacing, and hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And here they have the Hamlin, and this one is in a number 2 container for $16.98. You can see it also has that compact habit and has also started to send up some of its plume blooms. Another really pretty one. I also have this one, and I really like it. Similar specs on the Hamlin, also hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, blooms early summer through fall, 24 by 24 inches in spacing. And 2 more excellent varieties of sedum, both of these by proven winners. They are part of their Rock and Grow series. So they have the Rock and Grow Lemon Jade sedum. I grow both of these in my garden, and they're both lovely. So the Lemon Jade gets these really pretty kind of lemony yellow limey blooms, and that really thick foliage makes such a nice contrast. And the Lemon Jade gets to be, let's see, this one gets to be 16 to 18 inches in height, needs 26 to 28 inch spacing, and it is hardy in zones 3 through 9 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms early fall, and it wants full sun. Like we talked about earlier, all sedums are going to want a well-draining soil that leans dry and a full sun location. And this beauty on the side of it that is just starting to color up and get its really pretty coral color now is the Rock and Grow Coral Jade sedum. Now, I got this here at the Home Depot in the small quart-sized containers about 3 seasons ago now. They're filling out beautifully, and they were a pretty affordable way to buy them, but sedum is also super easy to divide. So this one here is $12.98. You could go home and easily split this into about 2 plants to start out, and then as the seasons go on, as they grow, you can divide them again. Super easy plant to divide and transplant. So the Coral Jade sedum gets to be 16 to 18 inches in height, again 28 to 30 inch spacing, so very similar to the Lemon Jade, and it is hardy in zones 3 through 9 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms late summer through fall. I cannot recommend sedums enough. Such a beautiful late season plant. You know, this is the second year that I've been growing this white variety of Gara, and I absolutely love it. I've been growing it in my annual containers, but I have friends who have grown it in the soil, in ground, and they have returned for them. The key with getting these to return is that they want a very well draining soil, almost like a sandy soil, and they want full sun. If they sit in too much moisture, they will rot and you won't get it to return, but it's worth a try. And this variety happens to be the Gara Buddleia White. I will show you the information. Here it is. It does list it as perennial for full sun, attracts butterflies. I can definitely vouch for that. The pollinators love it. Great for containers. They sure are, because they're drought tolerant. And that's how I've been growing them, and they are doing really well. And they bloom early summer through fall. They get to be a height of 10 to 16 inches. They need 16 to 20 inches in spacing, and they're hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, these look gorgeous paired with something like an ornamental grass. I actually went on a trip a couple of years ago, and they had a long border of these by a swimming pool. It was Gara alternated with some of the Hamlin grasses, and they looked so beautiful together. What a great pairing. And because I love to play with combinations, and I do this often on our trips, here is one that looks so pretty. So there is the white Gara, the Hamlin fountain grass, and a stone crop autumn joy sedum. The different textures, even though they have a lot of green, you can see the sedum has a different texture, and then those blooms will color up pink. Then you have those fuzzy plumes of the grass and those blades that provide another level of interest. And then you get these whimsical white airy blooms floating in between all of these. So pretty. I absolutely love this combo. The Autumn Joy Sedum is a classic variety. It gets pretty tall. I want to say probably 24 to 28 inches in height, but it also gets these really large leaves that hold on to a lot of moisture, and these large heads of blooms that will color up pink. Pollinators love them. Such a great plant. These are in their 1.5 gallon container for $14.98. Super easy to divide. They are deer resistant and drought tolerant, and they want full sun. Now, on the back of the tag, it does list the Autumn Joy Sedum as getting 16 to 24 inches in height, 15 to 18 inch spacing, and hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. But I do find with sedums that if they don't get enough light, they can sometimes stretch and get leggy because they're reaching for that sun. So if you see them kind of doing that, getting really tall and then splitting in the middle, it could be one of two things. They're either getting too much water or not enough sun. Check out these beauties. These are Heliopsis, and the variety looks more compact, but it could be, again, deceiving. Just because they're in a container here doesn't mean that's how they'll grow at your house, right? So we need to always look at the tag to identify the size. So this variety is Heliopsis. It doesn't name the name of it. It just has this really pretty golden coloration, 24 to 36 inches in height, 24 inch spacing. Oh, actually right there, it looks like Sol Giotto could be the name of it. Water when dry and hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So very hardy, and blooms midsummer through fall. But look at the beautiful color on this. It has like a golden yellow and then a bit of an orange in the center. The blooms are not overly huge, and they have these dark stems. You see that? Really pretty. And check out these hardy hibiscus. So I often get questions about whether or not these are perennial, and hardy hibiscus are perennial, but they also have some varieties of hibiscus that they sell as annuals. But these are hardy in the sense that they will come back for you every year if you're within their growing zone. So this variety is the Cookies and Cream by Proven Winners. It is a newer one as of last season. Really pretty dark foliage and this creamy white bloom. The blooms are huge. They're about 8 to 10 inches across and really striking. So this one here gets to be 42 to 48 inches in height. It needs actually 30 to 36 inches in height and 42 to 48 inches in width. So on average, these do get about 4 by 4 in size. So you want to give them some space. They're a perennial that get as large as a shrub. So you really only need one unless you want to create a drift of them. And they are hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. They bloom midsummer through early fall. I will say that they are late to break dormancy. Here in my zone 6B, 7A, they usually break dormancy around mid to late May, but then they will bloom later in the season as well. Mine is just starting to bloom. I have the Summerific Perfect Storm. So beautiful, a light pink with a red center, and it's just starting to open up this week. Look at that, it has dark foliage, which adds another level of interest, and this one has those white blooms. And these are in a 3 container for $24.98. And one more thing I want to mention about hardy hibiscus is just as the blooms start to swell and get really juicy and big like this, the deer tend to like them. So I do spray mine with a deer and rabbit repellent in my garden. So if you deal with deer, just something to be aware of. The knockout roses are still looking great. They put out a bunch of new foliage. So they have a big flush in about June, and then they will reload again and start blooming in August through September and really go nonstop until your first hard frost. I absolutely love the knockout rose. It's a tough as nails landscape shrub rose, hardy in zones 5 through 11. They want full sun and a well-draining soil. And they have shades of coral, the double pink, the traditional red, and these are a plant that I know for sure typically go on clearance in the fall. So keep an eye open if you're looking to add some knockout roses. I'll tell you what, here's a plant that I'm keeping my eye out for clearance because I really want to add this one to my garden. This is the Polka Dot Phlox. Now, because I still have plenty of things at home waiting to be planted, I'm not in a rush to get it, and it seems like no one else is in a rush to buy it, so I'm gonna hold out. And this is a really pretty variety. You can see that it has a very soft pink, almost white with a pink eye, and the Polka Dot, let me see, they actually have a tag here. The opening act Polka Dot Phlox by proven winners. It wants full sun. Most varieties of phlox do, with the exception of, say, the creeping phlox or the woodland phloxes. If you give them full sun, they're gonna bloom beautifully. They get to be 22 to 26 inches in height, and they need 30 to 36 inches in width, and they're hardy in zones 4 through 8 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. They bloom early summer through late summer, and they want full sun. Now, a couple of years ago, I did buy a variety called Fashionably Early Crystal. I did get it on clearance actually at the end of the season. Really pretty, very similar in color to this variety, but it does get a bit of powdery mildew for me. So I will probably move it somewhere I can give it more space and replace it with this beauty. And currently it is listed as $24.98 for this number 3 container. And I would certainly divide it when I take it home to get 2 to 3 plants out of it because it's a pretty good sized plant. So I saw some markdown signs, and it turns out it's mostly on the annuals at this point. So they have some mandevilla or dipladenia. They also have some ferns on clearance. These are things here in the Northeast that I would certainly pass on unless you have some kind of party going on this weekend and you need some plants to decorate with, then maybe pick some up, or if you're planning on overwintering them. But I will tell you, I've tried to overwinter mandevilla before and it didn't go very well. They drop all of their foliage, making quite a mess over the winter, and then they take forever to push out new growth and blooms come the next season. I'm talking like I was waiting until about late July, maybe even August before I got flowers, versus buying them new every season and having flowers in May. So to me, it wasn't worth the time investment, but let me know if any of you have tried it. If you have, then it might be worthwhile picking some up on clearance. And here are the type of hibiscus that are annual, although some people do overwinter these as well. These are marked down. They were, it looks like maybe 16 to 24.98, but they're now $9.88. These still look pretty good. They do have some bloom buds on them. This one is about to open up. Looks like it's a pretty shade of like an orangey coral. But these here are considered an annual hibiscus. Well, that brings us to the end of the August inventory here at the Home Depot. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.